I knew that I would like the Targonian lore, because I like sci-fi space and I like fantasy. And when you combine those two, you get Targon. However, I did not expect to love it this much. So far, Riot gave us the cinematic, and they revealed 4 cards. But what's amazing about those 4 cards is that 3 of them are pretty awesome, and 1 of them is godly, quite literally. And I am not saying this just because I think that this might be my favorite character ever. Design-wise, I love this one. But it is also because this card reveals so much lore, even though we seemingly know almost nothing about him. But that's wrong. So before we get into the cinematic, let me quickly talk about the Arbiter of the Peak. First of all, because this card is called the Arbiter of the Peak, that means he's standing at the peak of Mount Targon. But curiously enough, if you look at the background, you can notice that he's standing in the same place that was shown in the post about the new Targonian expansion. So yes, this is what the very tip of Mount Targon looks like. But that's not the coolest thing about the Arbiter by far. Just by looking at him, you may realize that we have heard about a person like this before. And that's because if you go back to Tarik's story, in his bio, we learned that when he ascended Mount Targon, he was met by a crystallized figure that wore the shape of a man. And this figure told him the truths of his world. So yes, the crystallized person Tarik met at the peak of Mount Targon was the Arbiter. However, there is one more mind-blowing thing about the Arbiter. I haven't listened to the data-mined voices of the Targonian cards, but I saw a tweet that said that when the Arbiter is played against Zoe, he has 2 interactions with her. First of all, he calls her Little Twilight.
You have returned, young Twilight.
Which makes sense because Zoe is the aspect of Twilight. But the Arbiter also calls Zoe Misha.
Maisha, if you seek passage.
Which was the previous aspect of Twilight. Misha was alive during the Darkin Wars. And in fact, it was Misha as the aspect of Twilight who gave the mortals the magic to seal the Darkin inside their weapons. However, sometime after that, Misha died, we don't really know how, and Zoe became the next aspect of Twilight. However, you may be asking why is the Arbiter calling Zoe Misha? And the explanation is actually really cool. You see, Zoe didn't become an aspect by ascending the mountain. It was the aspect of Twilight itself that reached down and chose Zoe. What happened in Zoe's story is that Zoe was part of the Rakor tribe. But Zoe really hated studying. She found learning about ancient tribes quite boring. And so she spent most of her time just making fun of the teachers and running away. And so one day when she skipped school again, the aspect of Twilight noticed her as she was running away from all the teachers. And right in the moment where the teachers almost caught Zoe, the Twilight was impressed by how joyful Zoe was. And so it summoned 6 objects in front of Zoe, 5 of which would help Zoe get rid of her problems. It was a bag of gold, a sword, a completed study book, a devotion rug, a silk rope, and the 6th useless item was a toy ball. Of course, Zoe chose the ball. She kicked it into their village, and she was laughing at how much it was bouncing around and annoying people. The Twilight didn't need any further proof that Zoe could represent it really well. After all, the aspect of Twilight is supposed to be a trickster, someone unpredictable, and joyful, which Zoe certainly was. And so the Twilight summoned a portal for Zoe that would take her to the Celestial Realm, and there she became the aspect of Twilight. Now, going back to the Arbiter, this means that the Arbiter does not know that Misha is gone, and that Zoe is the new aspect of Twilight, because Zoe never ascended the mountain, and so she never met the Arbiter. That's why the Arbiter is confused. What is amazing about this is that Riot literally just gave us 4 cards with no descriptions. And just by knowing the lore, you can already get an insane amount of information from them. So I can't wait till we get all the Targonian cards. Because you can bet I am making a video covering those. Anyway, that's not why we are here today. Because today we are going to have a look at the new cinematic, The Vaulted Road. Now, unfortunately, this cinematic doesn't answer too many of our questions. If anything, it makes us ask even more questions. And so this video will be more about speculating, rather than explaining what is really happening. With that said, there are still a few cool Easter eggs which I can point out. So without further ado, let's have a look at the newest Tales of Runeterra cinematic about Targon. The cinematic begins at the Sun Ward Temple on Mount Targon. which is a new place to us. However, this place was obviously based on the art we can find on Universe, the one called Life on the Edge. This art describes how the Rakor tribe carved their towns into the mountain, and how they are using hanging thick cloth to shelter themselves from the wind and the snow. But although these two places look nearly identical, except for the fact that they are mirrored, the place in the art on Universe does not have a name. So I would like to say that this is the Sun War Temple, but for the sake of being accurate, let's just say that these two are separate places.
The prisoner! She's gone!
And as we get the two Solari guards running to tell the others that the prisoner went missing, I quickly want to point out how well their armor and weapons match what we can find on Universe. Although they didn't directly follow what we can find there, because on Universe they had much wider shields. With that said, the shields that we can see in the cinematic were likely made in the image of the aspect of the sun. Anyway, as we get the shot that looks into the distance, I quickly want to point out that the fact that everything in Targon seems to be swirly. For example, you have the massive spiral at the background, and all the rocks seem to be slightly twisted. Well, it's not just a random artistic decision, because all those swirly bits were described in numerous Targonian stories. Although those stories came way before we even got the map of Runeterra, let alone any proper art. So it's cool to see that Riot stuck to the same design over the years. And then as we get a shot of the Solari boy waiting for the Lunari girl, which is definitely not a reference to any real life story, more importantly, if we ignore them, there are things that we can mention about the circle which we see here. You see, these circles are scattered all across Targon. And in fact, some of the art on Universe mentions that these circles fell from the sky. But these days, nobody knows their purpose. So, here is what the art says. This metallic stone fell from the mountain long ago, and is now used to mark a delineation between the Rakor camp and the unknown terrors of the mountain. In a sacred farewell ceremony, the climbers beginning their ascent are celebrated. This day marks the moment when the fate of their souls are given into the hands of Targon. These climbers will likely never be seen again. Then there is also the second art, which says, ancient gateways of glittering metals mark the end of each habitable base. The Rakor celebrates the moment they cross these thresholds, and continue their revolution under the sun's bright path. So essentially, these circles, including the one we can see in this cinematic, are leading the way to the peak of Mount Targon. They are more like checkpoints, and since they fell from the sky, they were likely put here by the Celestials. And in a moment you will see that everything we just read will reflect in the cinematic too.
The Solari will be here soon.
And the Lunari already are. I've seen this before.
And here I quickly wanna stop, and I wanna say that we have no idea who these characters are. Which is a little bit sad, because that means I just don't feel attached to them. You will see that this fits the entire cinematic. There are pieces of story that are simply missing here. And it almost feels like Riot will release a story that will give this cinematic some context. Because right now, there are things about this cinematic which we just don't know. We don't know why there is a Lunari and a Solari that fell in love. How did they fall in love? We know that the Lunari was a Solari prisoner. But how did the Solari boy get to know her? Was he visiting her in the prison? Just like Lux was visiting Silas? If so, how did they fall in love there? There are a lot of questions like this that just don't get answered. Anyway, the boy said that the Solari will be here soon, because of course the Solari are now chasing the prisoner. And she replied that the Lunari are already here. Which makes me think that the Lunari know what is about to happen. Although, besides Diana, we don't actually get to see any other Lunari. So what she said here is actually a little bit confusing. But then the Lunari girl remembered that she saw all of this in a vision. This is a reference to a Philios story, where it was revealed that the Lunari go through a sort of a ceremony, where they go deep into the mountain, they follow the moonlight, and they end up at the moonlit pools of water, which show them visions of their future. And I believe that's what the Lunari girl was referencing here. The Lunari are all about visions, and so this fits. And of course, in the background we can see that there is going to be an eclipse. Which, because as we explained in the previous videos, we know that the moon is basically a magic-filled stone floating in the sky. When the sun and the moon cross, magical things happen on Runeterra, which we will see here as well. And once again, if you look at the stones around, more swirly bits. Targon is very swirly.
vision in the pools. When the moon blocks the sun, our path to freedom will be illuminated at Dragon's Roost.
And here she just explained what I just said. Magical stuff happens when the moon and the sun cross. And her visions showed her that the moon will reveal a path for her. And then as the two embrace, they hear the Solari coming, and so they run through the circle. And notice how there is a path right behind the circle. Once again, that's because these circles are checkpoints leading to the peak of Mount Targon. One thing I want to point out here is that I am not sure how you can have steps on Mount Targon. According to the lore, the entire mountain was literally ripped up from the ground. That's why you have pools of frozen water on the side of the mountain. It was because there was probably a lake, but as the Celestials ripped the mountain up, they dragged the water with it and it froze to the side of it. So this entire place is mostly supposed to be just rocks. Even snow is rare so high up, because clouds can't get there. So I'm actually confused how you can have footprints here. Anyway, then it is revealed that yes, Leona was chasing them. And here the cinematic gets a little bit suspicious. Because Leona is supposed to be the aspect of the sun. She is an incredibly powerful warrior, stronger than any mortal on this world. Stronger than even some of the demigods. And so I wonder, why is she chasing a lonely prisoner? Surely she has better things to do. But there is a possible explanation. Perhaps Leona knows what is about to happen in the cinematic, and she is chasing them to see that with her own eyes. That's why, as they get closer, you'll see that Leona doesn't even attack them. Anyway, let's continue. And then as the shot zooms in, more swirly bits. But more importantly, you can see that yes, the gate was leading to the peak of Mount Targon, because what you see in the background here is the main part of the mountain. This is the steepest part that will get you to the very peak, and you will see that at the end of the cinematic. And then as the two non-copyrighted lovers ascend the cliff, Leona walks out of the shadows, which, as I said, you know, she is technically Lunari. But when the girl mentioned that the Lunari were already waiting for them, I expected more of them. And at the bottom we see the 3 guards, but not Leona. Huh. And then when they see that nothing is happening, the boy mentioned that there is no path. Because as the Lunari said, the moon was supposed to show them a path. And so cleverly the Lunari girl says,
have faith.
You know, because Targon is all about faith. However, again, I don't really feel sympathetic for these two people, because they are new characters. They don't have any pre-established lore. So I'm just like, okay, anyway, let's keep going.
There she is!
And him? Traitor.
Wait!
Yeah. Why? Why did the guard just shoot? Isn't he supposed to follow Leona's command? I thought the Rakoran warriors were supposed to have some discipline. Especially when they are standing in the presence of the aspect of the sun. But that's not the craziest part. That arrow was in the air for so long. There is no way Leona wouldn't have the time to burn the arrow with her light from the sky. In fact, Leona used her light as a weapon like this in her story before. So if Leona really cared about these two kids, she could have saved them. And of course this angered Diana. Because in the new lore of Diana and Leona, the two were pretty much the scholars of the Solari. During the times when the Solari didn't even think that the Lunari were real, they thought that all Lunari were heretics and that there was no real faith behind them. But over time, Diana found out that the Lunari did actually exist. And when she realized that this meant that the Solari were lying to her the entire time, she decided to ascend the mountain to look for the truth. But Leona noticed that Diana was sneaking away from their temple, and so Leona followed her to the peak of Mount Targon as well. That's how Diana and Leona ascended. Diana was looking for the truth and Leona simply followed her. And there the two became the aspect of the sun and the aspect of the moon. Although they didn't really get any direction from the aspects. They were just given the powers, but they didn't really know what to do with their powers. And that's why there is this the sun against the moon conflict. It's because you have two godly warriors, with Leona controlling her powers really well, and Diana not really understanding what to do with her powers, and so the aspect of the moon itself has the option to dominate Diana's mind. So what Leona is trying to do now in the lore is that she's trying to help Diana control her own powers. More importantly, Even though that's what their lore is about, it doesn't answer any of our questions here. I don't know why Diana and Leona are just staring at these two kids, but the most logical answer would be that they both know that something magical is about to happen. After all, there is an eclipse coming. And so they don't want to intervene because they wanna see what will happen. So going back to what just happened, if Leona didn't really want to intervene, she could have burned the arrow from the sky.
Night and day are just two halves
Of the same circle.
And then these two finish their own sentences, which is supposed to reflect on the fact that they probably know each other really well. But if they both know the saying, the night and day are part of the same cycle, I assume this is a Lunari saying, and so it was the Lunari girl who taught the Solari boy about the Lunari faith. Perhaps that's how they met. Once again, I would really like a full story explaining this.
our path together.
And then you can see how angrily Diana activated her shield, because you know, that's a reference to the game. And I assume this is a reference to the fact that the aspect of the moon can sometimes fill Diana with rage and dominate her mind. But here her mind didn't really seem dominated. She was just angry, so this scene seemed a little bit pointless.
Have faith.
Anyway, as her visions showed her, the path was going to be revealed. And as he took the step, a lot of people pointed out to me that this flower might be Noctum, which is the flower that makes the numbing poison which Aphelios is drinking to numb his body and let his sister join him. However, not only did we see an art on Universe that shows the Noctum flower, but also in Aphelios' lore, it is described that this flower grows underwater, in the pools that are lit by moonlight. So because this one doesn't really fit that description, I don't think this is Noctum. And here, as the two vanish into the horizon, I understand what this scene is supposed to represent. This scene is supposed to show Leona that the Lunari are real, and that it is a real faith. But again, because we have no idea what is happening here, it all kind of falls apart. Once again, I would really like a story explaining this. But then, going back to the circles. To prove my point that this is really leading to the peak of Mount Targon, the shot then zooms out to really show us the peak. Yeah, I have no idea what this is. I assume that this is a star constellation for the sun and the moon combined. In fact, I'm confident in calling this the eclipse constellation, because you can see the smaller circle for the moon, the bigger circle for the sun, and two hands, which could be still people, as was shown previously. But the point is, I do think that this is representing eclipse. But why did we see the two kids floating there? And where did they even go? I have no idea. Nothing in the lore even hints at what is happening here. All we got from the stories of Diana, Leona and Aphelios, and even Zoe, is that something is going to happen to the Lunari. The cycles in the stars are going to favor them more. But what does that mean? We don't know. Apparently it means that the Lunari can hide in the celestial realm, because that is the only thing that would make sense here. It almost feels like these two somehow walked into the celestial realm. But why? We don't know. But then Diana and Leona saw each other, it seemed like they were going to fight, but they didn't. Because since they were childhood friends, they still like each other. And that's the end. Yeah, stuff happened, but not much was explained. I really hope that this means that we are getting a Targonian lore when the expansion gets launched. It would make sense, because there are so many unanswered questions here. Who is the prisoner? Why was the prisoner so important that the aspect of the sun had to chase her? Why was Diana waiting there to make sure the prisoner got free, but then when the arrow was going to shoot her, Diana didn't move either? I really don't know why Diana was there. It is almost infuriating, as you can tell from my voice. With that said, a single story could make this really good. So Riot, don't sleep on this. Because right now, all I really got from the cinematic is that yes, Targon is swirly, as we expected, and it confirmed that the metal gates really lead to the peak. But what's really sad about this is that the Targonian cards revealed how awesome Targon is going to be. Especially with the Arbiter, which again is probably my favorite design ever. So you can just imagine how awesome it would have been if we saw this Arbiter, letting the two lovers pass into the Celestial Realm. But yeah, the Arbiter wasn't there, and the two lovers got there anyway, just because. I really want the explanation. So yeah, that's gonna be it for the cinematic. As I said, it is mostly speculations and being angry at the fact that we don't know much about it. But hopefully the cards will make up for it. So to make your day better, let's end this video with a meme.
Good time was had by all. I'm pooped.
Yes, I should be. Good Lord, what is happening in there?
Aurora Borealis?
Aurora Borealis. At this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within your kitchen.
Yes.
That's it?
No.